welcome to our colloquium series, our third Wednesday of the month. Thank you everyone for attending. This series is different every week, but so far this year, what has been the common thread is that we've had some awesome, amazing alum of Kocharya and an even awesomer and even more amazinger, sorry Pradeep, guest. No, you're pretty awesome. You're both pretty amazing. But we've had some amazing C-level guests who tell us about coaching in their life, in their work. They tell us about their experiences and their perspectives. So we learn something new and unique and different every single week. So today's webinar is going to be equally as fascinating. And if I remember correctly, today is about hiring coaches, which should be super interesting, or among other topics. Anyway, Pradeep will introduce the session and our speakers and himself, and I will see everyone on chat as well as on the socials later. If you need anything, you know where to find us, kocharya.com. If you need me, you know where to find me, magda@kocharya.com. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for being here. Pradeep, over to you.
Thank you, Magda, as always. Set the energy rolling, right? Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who are joining from various parts of the world. I can see from the chats that have been coming in. Thank you so much for being here today. For me, and I'm off Kocharya, it's really an honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity to have a conversation with a leader who has had a lot of extremely, what should I say, great accomplishments under her belt over the many years that she's been working. And more importantly, someone whom I've had the opportunity and the honor to sort of interact with some years ago and since then, and someone whom I regard very highly for her being so grounded and authentic despite all the accomplishments. Vishaka, I hope you don't mind me taking the liberty to say so. So let's welcome Vishaka. A warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us, despite, I'm sure, the number of things that are going on in your world, especially with the second wave of the pandemic hitting us here. Both of us are in Bombay, and that's where we are speaking from. So really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us and share with us, or your perspectives, your experience with, and your perspectives of coaching as we go through this hour. Just
Thank
a brief introduction.
Let me in turn kind of thank you. And as an introduction to all the panelists, my first interaction with Pradeep was when we had a program and we wanted to facilitate, we wanted Pradeep to facilitate. And it was one of those moments when I was a very initial CEO and I got at my vulnerable best. And it was Pradeep who literally kind of walked me through it and said, it's okay. Vulnerability is a strength in leaders. So I'll never forget that, which is almost 6 years back, foundation of my being a CEO. So anytime for you, Pradeep, and anytime for coaching.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vishaka. So just a quick introduction on Vishaka, apart from the things that I said, which I truly believe in. And, Vishaka is the CEO of one of the youngest insurance companies that we have in this country. It's India first insurance company. And the very fact that it's the youngest itself poses its immense challenges in a world that is extremely competitive. But she's been steering this ship for the last 6 years, and to great heights, I might say, if you look at the performance of the company over the years. Obviously that her accomplishments, her contributions have won a lot of recognition from very prestigious journals, from prestigious business magazines. She's made it to all the influential lists you can think of. The top 50 most influential business leaders, right? Most powerful women, actually, from 3 times in a row. not once, 3 times in a row. She's been bestowed with being the most influential woman by the Business World magazine. ICAI, that is the Indian Chartered Accountants Institute, the equivalent of the CFAs, etc., outside this country, has recognized her as the prestigious, given her the prestigious Business uh, Leader Award. And in addition to making it to all these lists, she's also a very sought after thought leader, especially in our industries, because she chairs and takes part in a number of advisory bodies which advise the government and various other businesses on the insurance front, in addition to being on the board of a company. So that's the formal side of Vishaka. The real side that I at least hope to see, and I really look forward to, is that authentic Vishaka who never stops learning. And what she brings to the table today is going to be her perspective on coaching. But the beauty is it's not one perspective. You'll probably get 3 perspectives. One as a leader, as a CEO, etc. A second as someone who's actually experienced coaching herself. And a third, and guess what? Third is a CEO who's on her way to become a certified ICF coach. So I'm really looking forward to getting all of these 3 perspectives in with relationship to coaching, which I'm sure will be extremely illuminating for all of us who are in this profession or who are on their journey to join this profession. So thank you once again, Vishaka. Truly appreciate you being here today. Thank you. So let me start. One of the things we'll do, Vishaka, is somewhere along the way, if it's okay with you, if people are raising hands or there are questions that people are asking, then we might just once in a while take a look at those questions instead of doing it at the end of the chat. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. It's more of a free flowing conversation, right? Keeps it interesting and alive.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. So let's start with, when and how did you come into contact with or experience coaching for the first time?
So this was in my earlier organization where I had the good fortune of having a CEO who was himself a coach, a trained coach, but not necessarily certified practicing. And uh, we had a very strong succession planning in place. And I was identified as the successor to the CEO as the number one. And every time he would want to put ready in how many years, and he would struggle with it. And until he came to me and said, Vishaka, you great, you need to be there, but you're not there for something missing. And like every person who gets that kind of a feedback, it's like, oh, you're not ready to give up your chair, and so you don't think I'm ready. That's like the instant reaction of almost everybody, right, who gets that kind of a feedback. But with him, I didn't have that reaction because he was a foreigner, and I knew he had a fixed tenure and he would leave. So you suddenly are willing to take that feedback that much more honestly, or with openness. So I said, sure. So what is it that's missing? So he said, why don't we get you an executive coach? And that was the first time I'd gone to this organization. And this is probably a story, it'll interest all the coaches who are listening in. Um, I had an orientation meeting with at least 8 to 9 coaches from that organization that we had identified, and I just didn't like anyone that I met. So finally, the CEO of that coaching federation actually turned around and said, "Okay, let me meet her and let me talk to her and see what is she looking for." And he ended up becoming my coach. And what I realized that as a coachee, I was looking for is a coach who is willing to use all his or her knowledge, all the information or processes or structure he or she has and adapt it to suit my personality and my needs. Whereas the multiple people I had met before that, I found them so structured. It almost came across like I, as a coachee, will need to fit into their structure rather than their structure adapting to fit into my needs. So I
Interesting.
think that was one big learning. That was my introduction, but that was also how uh, I got one of the most wonderful coaches in the world, I would like to say. And a complete convert. I mean, the amount of difference that coach made to me, I don't know if I'm allowed to take names, but the amount of difference that he um, made me want to make that same difference to other people. And that was when I turned into, I'm going to become a coach someday. And that someday, so this was in 2013 that I had exposure, and that someday was
Oh, okay.
2020.
That's wonderful. So, do you mind sharing with us what did you get out of that coach?
Um, I think potential, definitely.
Mhm.
And I think a clear discovery of values and value conflict.
Hmm. Okay.
You know, I realized that we end up being our own biggest enemies because we have conflicting values, which we, because we don't identify, it's very hard for us to do anything about it. So I could give you a value conflict, which is very simple that I easily relate to, is where I believe work is worship. I believe that, when you're not paid to show up, you're paid to work, and there's no such thing as somebody else coming to motivate you. I mean, why do you need a motivator? You just need to turn up and work, boss. I mean, so that's my clear expectation of myself and of everybody. And I was unwilling to accept that there are people who need motivation. Everybody is not a self-starter. Everybody is not self-motivated. And that's why you have HR rewards and philosophies as a whole vertical and whole practice. But well, that was my blind spot, because I don't need external motivation. I just assumed nobody needs it, and if anybody needs it, then they're not up to the mark. And then there was a side to me which was feeling bad for people. I was extremely emotional. I would feel very bad for people, and these two were completely at loggerheads with each other. So when I would get demanding with people, I would feel bad about getting demanding with people. But when I didn't get demanding with people, then I'd feel bad about not giving the best to the organization. So there was a constant state of conflict there. Uh, you know, damned if I do, damned if I don't, kind of a thing. So something as simple as that, got pointed out, and then we could do something about it.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So
Wonderful.
that's one from a value conflict. The other one is beliefs that don't work for you any longer.
Mhm.
So I mean, one of the books that was given to me to read before we started the coaching was "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." So um, one of the statements I remember my CEO made to me was, "Vishaka, you're no longer a sales head. You're now chief marketing officer. You're one down to CEO. Your whisper will become a command. You don't need to be aggressive. You can be assertive and authoritative. You don't need to be aggressive. But that's a change that you don't realize. You just don't realize that. You don't realize that you've got power because of position, and you don't need to keep earning it any longer. You don't need to keep you've demonstrated enough because of which you are in a position. Now you don't need to keep demonstrating that same
Sitting.
quality. Now use that and do something with it. So beliefs that don't work for you any longer, outdated beliefs that you need to get rid of. So I think that was another big learning. And then the third, as the third or the first, which I said, was the potential. Discover what it is that you are capable of. What more are you capable of? I think all the self-limiting beliefs. I think it's these
That's
three
wonderful.
at a very high level.
Oh, that's wonderful. So it obviously is someone who's worked with the who of Vishaka. Who is Vishaka? And what does she want to be? Wow. Amazing. Lovely example. Thank you so much for it. If you look back on it, is there anything that you expected from it, or if on hindsight you feel that you did not get?
No, I really, truly was blessed to have a fantastic coach. Um, and and what I loved about it is that the structure did not stifle me.
Hmm.
So, when my coach realized that I like to think aloud and it takes me time to sort out my various thoughts to be able to arrive at a conclusion, he never put a 1 hour timer there. So whenever the meetings were, it would be like, okay, please block your half a day. And he would block his half day if I was going to his office and he would expect me to block. We kept our meetings very fluid. We had them in conference rooms, we had them in his office, we had them at my office. But I think it was we set ourselves those spaces where we could talk, and it was never run by the clock. When I would look back at the notes, I would see so much structure. But I was very sure when I spoke, it didn't have that much structure. But the notes that he made brought so much structure to what I had said. And I refer to those notes even today at times, just to get some clarity. So no, I didn't have expectations, Pradeep, because I hadn't experienced coaching before. This was my first experience, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Wow. So, from what you're telling me, oops, there seems to be an echo. Um, it appears that it was very important for you that the coach is someone who understands you and then responds to that understanding and works with that understanding. Is that a fair statement to make?
Absolutely, absolutely. And uh, so then, because I was so influenced by it, I said we must give coaching to exposure to the other people, people we want to groom, and so on and so forth. There's this, I distinctly remember this one particular DR of mine who I definitely felt needed coaching from a more of a self awareness. And pardon my complete gender bias here, but I have found a lot of men not being in touch with their own emotions and in touch with their own feelings as easily as my female colleagues have been. So on my limited sample size, I will say that most of my male colleagues have not really been people who've been in touch with their feelings, and they would work on a very uh, authoritative basis with lots of preset conditions and so on. So I wanted coaching to that individual, and as it was going, and when I checked in with his coach once or twice, I said, this is not going to get the results that we wanted. And truly enough, it didn't. The coach had a 1 hour. The coach had specific questions that he would ask. It was it was a Q&A that was happening and not a conversation. It became so prescriptive, and it was, I mean, I could make out now with the hindsight of knowing what a coaching process is and having seen what an ICF process is and how structured it actually becomes. Now I realize that what he was doing was just sticking to the textbook script. And I think that really doesn't help.
It's true. Yeah. So when you, I mean, as you have, hired coaches for your DRs, what are some of the things that you look for? I'm sure that will be of tremendous interest to all the people on this evening, coach. What does a CEO look for in a coach?
The desire to make a difference. While people say coaching is all about facilitating the coachee to discover what their goals are and do it. Um, and I love the name of this institute, which is Coach Arya, which is basically an acharya. And acharya takes ownership for his disciples. And Acharya doesn't say, I'm teaching, now you take whatever best you can from me. I think I look for coaches who are extremely committed to outcome, who are not going to be looking at their at a timer and charging by the hour and not charging to make a difference. Um, I, I I look for coaches with a passion to make a difference, because that's what coaching is all about. It is not it is a difference, right? It's the difference between a good teacher and a bad teacher, even in school and college. I mean, you had teachers who would come in and just, do their 1 hour and leave, and you had teachers who
Right.
would come with passion, with preparation, with so much work done, pre-work done, engaging the students. I mean, even the most horrible students in the class would all be ears and attentive because the teacher was so good.
Right.
It is that distinction, that passion, that ownership that I look for in a coach.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure there will be a lot of. I just a request to all the people listening in. Please ask your questions as you go ahead, and we'll sort of look at them as we go around, so that we are mindful of the fact that we are answering your question, asking your questions, and responding to them rather than just my questions to Vishaka. So please feel free to sort of put in your questions on the Q&A. Or on the chat if that's what you'd like, if you like prefer. Thank you. And again, my question is coming to you as a leader, Vishaka, who has hired coaches. Apart from sort of looking for the things that you said you look for, which is really the passion as well as the commitment, I would say, to make a difference to the person they're working with. Would you, what how do you assess at the end of the day whether the coaching has met what it should have met or not?
Um, So, Pradeep, I think everything has measurable results, right? I mean, there is nothing. Even when you set your goals, um, and I can use a little bit from the coaching curriculum. You start with current reality, right? And you do put a number to the current reality, and you do put a number to what will the goal look like once it's achieved, right? So when you are describing what will it look like when it is achieved, and I think that's an indicator of how successful the coaching has been. For instance, there's also a question from Nidhi, on coaching experience. For instance, I had a coach recently for one of my direct reports who is an extremely talented individual. Um, I I really like the energy she brings, the experience, the subject matter experience she's got, but she's terrible at communication. Her ability to be extremely sensitive um, to her emotions versus her ability to be sensitive to the impact she has on others were at a complete opposite. You know, highly sensitive to what she's told, but highly insensitive to the impact she's making. So we worked actually with a coach. She had so my DR had an option to choose the coaches, and we put about 3 or 4 coaches in front of her. We finally chose a coach who was not an MCC certified, as against somebody who was an MCC certified, because of the rapport that they both built. So that coach also was an artist. This girl is also an artist in addition to her day job, and they connected at a very different level altogether. And I think she could just adapt to the needs of the coachee. So the results were very clear. The results were, how many meetings will you not have a conflict?
Okay.
How many issues get resolved on a single mail?
Oh, okay. Very interesting.
So it's a period of 6 months. How many times do you not interrupt a conversation? So there were very, very clear, measurable results that we put in there, you know, uh, for it to happen. And I think constant hand-holding during the process, even from me to say, look, it is difficult. Because I know I went through that process when I started my coaching. And I remember I was so low. I said, I can do nothing, because you move from that unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, right? And that phase when you're moving from conscious incompetence to conscious competence, that phase can be so difficult. It can be so debilitating for the coaches. I don't even know if people realize, if coaches realize how debilitating it can be. I do know that I had the benefit of my CEO, who was a coach, who pulled me through it. Um, and also someone who just pointed out a very clear curve of a tick, and they said, look, you will slide down before you start sliding up. So just be prepared for it. So I think that is something that I've seen a lot of coaches not being able to do. And uh, and when the coaches start sliding downwards, because they don't know that they will slide downwards before they can get up again, and because they're not given that, at least in my experience, they're not given that harsh truth and the hand holding required to go past that slide. I feel a lot of coaches start putting up their defenses. They don't get into that conscious incompetence at all, and they just stay in a very half-hearted zone of uh, identified competence becoming a better competence,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
unidentified incompetence staying at unidentified incompetence.
Yeah, I love the way you put it in these wonderful, very clear pockets and the way you put it. Let's take some questions because I can see a few questions that have come. So
Yeah.
one is, would you consider a coach? This is from Nidhi. Would you consider a coach who has less coaching experience and is not having PCC credentials, but has worked in depth on organizational issues?
So as I said, I think for me it's I don't think a coach needs to have in-depth knowledge about organizational issues, right? And again, I'm drawing inspiration from the book that we were taught on whether the coach, and that's the coachee, then, while the coachee focuses on the problem, the coach focuses on the coachee. And I remember that diagram, which is so beautiful. So you're focusing on the coachee. You're not trying to you're not trying to give an organizational input as a coach at all. So you're trying to ask the right questions so that the coachee can use his or her organizational knowledge to solve the problem at hand,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
for self development. So I do not believe that it is about organizational knowledge at all. In fact, my coach was not from insurance or financial services. Zero understanding about insurance and financial services. But then he was not meant to be. He was not meant to give me a strategy or anything of that sort. He
Right.
was meant to enable me to think the way I wanted to think. So I don't think that organizational knowledge matters. MCC, look, MCC is a very valuable certification. It's aspirational for me, so I'll be the last one to put it down. But this is like how when you hire employees in the organization, if you have an IMA, I mean an IIT Chennai IMA candidate, and then you've got a BTech from WITS and an MBA from wherever, and the guy from WIT or the girl from WITS and MBA, let's say Sumaya, is got a brilliant attitude as compared to this person, you would hire the person with the brilliant attitude.
Sure. Thank you. And just for the benefit of all those who have logged in from various parts of the world, the institutions that Vishaka referred to are the elite institutions in this country, the equivalent of the Ivy Leagues elsewhere. So she was saying, if you have someone who is not from one of those elite institutions but has the right attitude, you hire that person over a person who comes from the elite institutes but need not have it. There is another
Thanks for that. I
question.
forgot that we have an international audience.
No problem. There is another question. What was that one emotion, attitude which made you decide to work with the coach that you selected?
um, an ability to adapt to my needs and not throw a rule book and structure at me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what accountability will you hold a coach for?
To be 100% vested.
Okay, that's great.
I think I have this, it's a very personal belief. Don't kill me for this. But I have this personal belief that, doctors should not be charging their patients if they are unable to treat the patients.
Yes.
I believe if the coach cannot really make a difference to the coachee because he or she has not been able to draw the best out of the coachee, not been able to assess whether the coachee is really even ready for coaching, because that's another thing I believe in, that all coaches are not ready for coaching. There are times when the coachee needs to have a little more self-awareness, little more willingness to be open, little more ready for coaching. Uh, and it's the coach's job to figure out whether the person is ready for coaching or not before you get in. So if a coach cannot make that difference to the coachee, cannot make that assessment, then I think the coaches shouldn't be charging the coachee either.
Yes. Yes, you're right. In fact, just before we started this conversation, we had an interesting conversation around a little bit around coaching charges, coaches charging the way they do, right? Or the amounts they do. Anyway, there's some more questions. Is it okay for us to take some more questions, Vishaka, at this stage?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there is another question from Pat Dixon, who asks, Vishaka, has the coaching experience coupled with your role as a coach changed your leadership style?
Oh, yes. Absolutely, yes. Um, yeah, an emphatic yes. Okay. and
I knew this was
what?
going to touch you. I knew
Yeah.
Take your time to answer this question because I think it's very, very important.
Yeah. In what way has it? So one of the primary things that this journey on certification to coaching taught me is a respect for the fact that people think differently. Um, you know, I'm trying to find an international example. If you've never seen, if you've never seen a salted crepe, you're always going to think crepes are sweet. And I think for me, it was like that. I had never really seen that there is a completely different way a person can think. Because you don't know what you don't know. I mean, if you don't know a different point of view, you don't know it exists until you know it exists. I don't know if I've confused everybody. So for me, the whole coaching journey brought to mind that people can think very differently. I always had a healthy respect for perspective, but the fact that it is not just perspective, but the entire processing of information and the entire approach to problem solving, an entire way of looking at it can be different, is something that coaching taught me, the journey to coaching taught me. And I interact with my teams differently. I'm more willing to invest in, okay, how are you thinking about this? As compared to uh, jumping in with a solution orientation, I have learned to pause, step back, and ask people, how are you thinking about it? And the kind of perspectives that come onto the table just because they are asked that question of, okay, how are you thinking about it, has helped our company dramatically. I might be exaggerating a bit when I say that we had some fantastic results in this COVID period, and I'm not sure how much of it I should not be giving credit to my coaching journey for.
Wow, that's powerful.
Too many double negatives there, but I just want to say that I will give credit to my coaching journey for the fact that as an organization, we tided over this extremely difficult year and ended the year with great results.
Wow, amazing. one more question. I'm going to read this out slowly. It's a little longish. So it's from Uday Kumar. Initial positive impressions about the coach. Have you stumbled upon unenvisaged blocks along the way? Realizing to take a pause to explore such concerns before traveling further in the coaching process? And if yes, how did you go about sorting out such concerns?
So, I think Pradeep, you asked me that question in different words, saying, was there anything that you wanted and did not get
Yeah.
from your coaching? And I would say that I didn't have those stumbling blocks. My biggest stumbling block, as I said, was when um, I became very consciously incompetent. I think that though it was in 2013, I still remember the depth of despair that I had gone to. Like, oh my God, I'm so useless. Oh my God, I can do nothing. I mean, I can't even write a mail. I don't even know how to motivate an employee. So it was a very bad phase. And I think at that phase, I did I did have external help to tell me that I was on on that downward edge of the V curve. Um, so, so maybe that's something coaches should prepare you for also. So if I really have to look for something, that's the one thing that I will look for and say that the coaches need to be able to identify with the coaches' emotions. Um, I mean, but honestly, I'm force fitting something because you asked a question.
Yeah, I appreciate. I think what Uday is trying to say, and I'm taking a stab at this, is in your journey, and I hope I'm sort of representing him correctly. I don't know. In your journey, have you come across something that was unexpected, like you said, your conscious incompetence, and then you felt that it required hanging on, it required addressing a lot more before you moved on? I hope that's what he's asking, because that's my interpretation. If there is a way you can clarify it, please do.
Oh yes, absolutely. I think, and I take that away for some of the coaching sessions that I do also. Um, sort out, sort out the individual's emotional state. Help that individual sort out their own emotional state. So, for instance, uh, to give an example, you know, I used to be called very unempathetic as a person. And the words that we used were, she can be very logical and clinical, and they used to hurt because you can't lead without empathy, and I didn't think I was that person. Just exploring that, to say, in some conversation, so when the coach took me back to, okay, tell me about yourself, your journey and all. I remember he caught on to that one thing when I said, I have never raised my voice at my children and I have never hit my children. And he just caught on to that and he said, that requires enormous amount of patience. Why do you call yourself impatient now? And that's when we spent time and we identified that it is not, I'm not an impatient person by nature, but I have this belief of um, delivering results on time, timely delivery of results. And then when we started observing, we realized that I could be very patient, and I had a high need for closure. So while I could be very patient in meetings which did not have an end time, meetings that had a 1 hour and for 45 minutes they went about with no solution, the last 15 minutes I would get completely aggressive because I have a need for closure. So I was not an impatient person, but I had a high need for closure and delivery of results. And just that realization made me change the way I conducted meetings and transformed my image from being an impatient, aggressive individual to a very approachable negotiator. Because I realized when I had sticky situations, I had hard timelines, I had back-to-back meetings, I would not pick up contentious issues for discussion.
You know, I told you, friends, that you're going to get very authentic responses to any questions you ask. And there is someone, Vishaka, who agrees with me. Your authentic sharing is beautiful, Vishaka. Loving the session. That's from Vijay herself. There is one more. There are a couple of more wonderful questions. So I'm going to read them out. As a coach and leader, where do you derive your energy from being an intrinsic motivator?
I would like to kind of just say belief. Um, I think there's some very, very closely held beliefs, but I will have to give a lot of credit to probably my genes also and my upbringing. I was always brought up with work is worship kind of a thing. I remember when I said it to someone in a women in leadership program, and they're like, "We've never heard this phrase before." And I said, "It's a very common phrase in India. We'll be brought up with that phrase very, very often." I think that, and I think it's a very high conscience, right? At the end of the day, when you're paid to do a job and you accept that payment, then you have to do that job. I mean, for me, it's a non-negotiable. I don't even think about it as I have intrinsic motivation. I just think about it as it's a job. You have to get up, you have to show up, you have to do it. That's what you're paid for. I'm so sorry, Shanmuga. That sounds like, I know it sounds like a very wishy-washy answer, but it is conscience, it is belief, it is self-respect. Uh, if you don't if you don't give your best, then I think you're insulting yourself, not anybody else.
Yeah, I found it a very powerful answer, Rakshaka, to be honest with you. That's me. I found it very powerful.
Thank you.
There is another question that I was going to come to anyway. So, in a context, Puneet has asked this question. As a leader and trained coach, how do you build a culture to align the doing and being of employees to unleash full potential? Something that I know that you really believe in, unleashing full potential.
So I was trying to read that question myself, but I couldn't. So can you
Yeah,
tell
I'm sorry. Here it is. As a leader and trained coach, how do you build a culture to align the doing and being of employees to unleash full potential?
um, so so we have regular town halls, and I engage in a very regular communication with my team. Um, so we have this whole themes in terms of uh, in terms of our values. So at an organization, I mean, I didn't create these values. These values were there before I joined, but I loved them so much that I just continued with it. And at every turn, today, I think you can go and shake any employee in the organization and they'll tell you our four values, and they're so simple. Like it's like do more, be helpful, think new, be honest, and action oriented, very clear value system. uh, we I emphasize on honesty, and my definition of honesty is when what you think, what you feel, and what you say and what you do are aligned. The moment, if your words, your actions, your beliefs, and your um, thoughts, when they're all aligned, that is honesty. Otherwise, it's not honesty. So even if you, so for instance, when people say, are you not dishonest when you're complimenting someone um, who is really not compliment worthy? And so I give this example of a report that was produced, and the report was not formatted well. And the report had all the data in it perfectly right. I wanted to give feedback to this individual because I know this individual sat overnight and worked on it and filled up in place of someone else. And people know how finicky I am also about formats, because this is a report you're submitting to the world, to the board. You can't have formats which are bad. But I complimented that individual, and later I was asked, was I being honest? I said, look, I didn't say anything about the format. I only told him how much I value the fact that he worked overnight to produce numbers, and there's not a single fault in one of the numbers, and how the numbers are all completely correct. I said, so I did not say anything which was incorrect, and that's what you need to focus on. What you are focusing on, are you being honest with it? And you set the trend. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Puneet, but I think you have to walk the talk. You have to lead from the front. You have to be open and communicative. You have to explain your actions. I actually walk in and explain my actions to people. I apologize to people if my mail, if I have a delayed response, goes with, I am sorry for the delay. That's how all my mails go. I have given absolute empowerment to the lowest person in the team. If I have not approved a mail in 2 days, they have the right to send me a reminder on my mobile saying this mail is pending. Can you please approve it? Um, so I don't know if all of those things. It's very hard to find one big magic wand which kind of changes the doing and being to unleash potential. It will have to be walk the talk. It will have to be demonstrate by action. It will have to be a repetitive, constant, ongoing culture creation. I think, and it takes a mosaic of things to make that happen, and not one big thing.
Yeah, sure. But when in my view, Vishaka, if I may, when a person like you, and you can see some of the comments that are coming on the chat about you, how people are experiencing you, when a person like that walks the talk, that does it all. And I've seen that in your organization. So I know I'm a witness to that in your organization. I know how that works.
I'm
So it's
blessed to
amazing.
have a fantastic team, actually. And I think small things, right? Like, I mean, when we had we had a really good year last year, and it was a very difficult year. It was I think one of the most challenging years I have personally faced. Even as a CEO, I think the number of times I have felt so lonely, and uh, and yet at the same time knowing I have the responsibility to show up and motivate everybody in the organization. Um, so when we finished this, I did a very small thing. I just sent a box of sweets to thank the family. I didn't send
Mhm.
it to thank my employees. I sent it to thank the family and said, thank you for sharing your office space, and thank you for your support that you provided to the team, because of which we could get these results. Because you know what? Nobody needed to open up their homes to the offices. Nobody. None of us who take pride in our homes also wanted to convert our office, a home, into an office. Uh, so I think it's genuine. It's authenticity expressed with heartfelt appreciation.
Yes. And in that context, there is a person who is a lady who has reached where you've reached, there is a question that I'd like to read out. General perception generated in the West is that women apologize too much and they need to change that. What's your opinion on that?
Yes, I have heard this, and um, I have seen it myself. I don't disagree. But what I have also observed after being pointed this out is there are a lot of men who don't have enough confidence too, and who do apologize, and who are extremely, squirmish, and, wish the earth would open up and swallow them. So I think it's not a gender. It's
Yes.
unfortunate that more women have been at that end, but I think equally there are a number of men who have been made to apologize all the time, because either they have had difficult upbringing, or they lack confidence, or whatever it is. Therefore, that applies to any individual. I think apologize when you're wrong. You don't need to start off a question. Don't need to start off a sentence with sorry. If that doesn't have to be an opening word. Now, may I can be an opening statement. It doesn't have to be sorry.
Wonderful, wonderful. Another question as a CEO, and I think we've got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to take these last two questions, and then there's one thing that I'd like to ask for the benefit of all the coaches who are not necessarily executive coaches. So just three questions, Vishaka, if you don't mind. As a CEO and a coach, what are the three key criteria that you use to decide the hat to don and also balance the hats? I'm not so sure I've understood it. Have you? Abhimanyu, you want to sort of expand on that while we take another question? Just because we are running out of time. So how do you embrace your own contradictions? I love this. I've heard you say something on this, which is just so powerful. Say it.
What did I say?
What you have said is, I think the question came in a little different way. The question really came in terms of what is the biggest challenge you face? And you say yourself, and the contradiction of the values that you.
Yeah.
So here it is. It's there. I didn't tell this person to ask the question. How do you embrace your own contradictions?
With difficulty, one always wishes that we had linear equations and linear thoughts and did not have contradictory values. I think you just have to love yourself and say it's okay. I mean, that's who you are. And once you identified it, it's so much more easier. And then you see what applies, I think that's what it is. So, I like to think of these, I'm a very visual person, and I like to think of these as, say, salt and sugar, okay? Or sugar and chili. And I think this is universal worldwide, so everybody can relate to sugar and chili. There are dishes, they both can stay and taste delicious. And there are dishes when you can't use both of them and you need to use them in isolation. So it is with your beliefs, your values, your personality traits. There are places where each of them fit in beautifully to form a bouquet. There are times when they need to be isolated and you need to only pick one and ignore the other. So I think
Wow.
that's what it is.
Wonderfully said. Oh, powerful. I wanted to ask a question on behalf of a lot of myself and some of the other coaches. When you see the world today with the change that has happened since 2020, so far corporates, at least in India, have typically focused on encouraging or focusing on executive leadership kind of coaches, right? Do you think that with all the changes and all the pressures, etc., and things that have happened thanks to the pandemic for the last 1 year plus, do you think the corporates will probably open up to look at coaching as a way to help the person holistically? So in terms of health and wellness, it could be relationships, it could be other areas of coaching which don't typically fall under the executive leadership coaching banner, so to speak. Do you think the corporations will open up to that?
So I definitely think that coaches should themselves open up to saying that you cannot coach an executive who is all messed up. So sorting out that individual before you give them a strategy to change some of their leadership styles is extremely important. Which is what I was saying about some of the coaches who I experienced for some of my DRs, right? Where they went by a rule book and they just rattled it off. So then they weren't even investing in seeing whether the coachee was ready for that rule book. So Pradeep, will organizations invest? For me, the question is, do you have coaches who are willing to be that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a supply and demand thing,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
When I was doing my coaching, one of the questions that kept coming up is because I had a batchmate who was a counselor, and it kept coming up, oh, I'm being like a counselor now, I'm not being like a coach. And I was so completely baffled by the whole thing. I said, "So what is it?" And I have a coachee right now who is like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not talking about my goal, I'm talking about myself. And I'm like, you know what, if you change your beliefs and you manage your interpersonal relationships with your family, it will help you to manage your interpersonal relationships at office. So
Right.
it's okay.
Correct.
We're talking interpersonal relationships. Let's just talk about that and about you. Because if
Yeah.
you can sort out your closest relationships, you can definitely sort out official relationships.
Yeah, that's one aspect of it, Vishaka. But I was wondering whether, for example, in corporates today, the health and wellness factor has gone up a lot. And there are health and wellness coaches who are focused on helping people around that. Then there are people who focused on helping people around enhancing or improving their relationships. So they're relationship coaches. Now, these are people who actually don't get exposed to the corporate world at all because the corporate world doesn't look at them. And I was wondering whether, given all that has happened in the last 1 year and given all that has emerged, do you think corporates will look at it and say, holistically saying, you know what, this person probably could do with a relationship coach, not just within this organization or within the peers, but also outside. So let's invest in.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to happen? Do you see that coming?
So, Pradeep, I think I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question correctly. But I think
No.
why I have a blind spot to it is because at India First Life, we've been offering that for the past 2 years, 2 or 3 years.
Uh-huh.
We
Okay.
have tied up with counseling centers, and we offer our employees the first session free, sponsored by the company, and then a 50% discount on the next few sessions until the sixth session.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Wow, wonderful.
we already have that. I mean, I know Google has it. They have counselors on their
Yeah.
roll. So I don't think it's new. I think it already exists. I think what might change is more people actually start using it, because what you're seeing is
Yes.
millennials not being afraid to use counselors. I think
Correct.
all that nonsense about not using counselors, sorry, pardon my language, all that hesitation about not using counselors and not using coaches, because if you take help, then you are not good enough, is probably predominantly restricted to uh, the older set of millennials. But the Gen Z and the younger millennials clearly have no qualms about taking support.
Vishaka, thank you so much for such an engaging conversation. Really appreciate. You can see a number of people complimenting you and saying thank you on the chat. Uh, Thanks, Vishaka, for such an insightful session. Highly impressed and inspired with the session straight from the heart, full on authentic energy and direct communication. Thank you for a great session and also for being vulnerable.